The night was frigid, the wind howling like a wounded animal, when I stumbled upon the shivering puppy, its eyes wide with fear, just like mine. Little did I know, as I cradled its tiny body, that I was also rescuing myself from a fate sealed in betrayal. Hours later, the warmth of its heartbeat against my chest drowned out the echoes of my family's shattered trust and the betrayal of a mother who chose her new husband over her own daughter. In that moment, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me, a reason to fight against the storm that threatened to consume us both. My name is Maya. This puppy would be my lifeline, my only ally in a world turned cruel. As I cradled the trembling puppy closer, I could feel the warmth radiating from its tiny body, contrasting sharply with the chill that had settled deep in my bones. This wasn't just a rescue, it was my escape from the chaos swirling around me. Outside, the rain continued to lash against the window, a rhythmic reminder of the storm both in the sky and within my heart. I glanced at Lily, who was standing in the doorway, her eyes wide and filled with innocent wonder. The puppy's tiny whimpers seemed to draw her closer, and I could see that she sensed something special about this little creature. "Maya, can I hold it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, carefully transferring the puppy into her small arms. The moment their eyes met, I could see a connection sparking between them, something pure and untainted by the struggles that had recently engulfed our family. In that instant, I was reminded that amidst our fractured reality, there were still moments of beauty waiting to be found, moments that could stitch together the jagged edges of our lives. Sarah entered the room a moment later, her expression a mixture of fatigue and worry. She had been trying so hard to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But I knew the weight of her burdens pressed heavily on her shoulders. I watched her face soften as she caught sight of the puppy nestled in Lily's arms. "Oh my, where did you find that little guy?" she asked, kneeling down to get a better look. I could see the light returning to her eyes, if only for a moment. It was a reminder of the mother I used to know before everything began to unravel. "It was outside in the storm," I explained, my voice steady despite the tumult within. I couldn't just leave it there. Sarah reached out, gently stroking the puppy's fur, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a small spark that could reignite the fading flames of our family bond. But just as hope began to blossom, Daniel stepped into the room. His presence loomed large, casting a shadow over the fragile moment we were experiencing. I could feel the tension in the air shift, the atmosphere growing thick and unwelcoming. He had been emotionally absent for so long, consumed by his own struggles, that I often wondered if he even realized how far he had drifted from us. The puppy whined softly, as if sensing the sudden change. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice flat and devoid of warmth. I could see the skepticism in his eyes, the unspoken judgment lingering just below the surface. It was a reminder of the wall he had built between himself and the rest of us, a barrier that felt insurmountable at times. I held my breath, waiting for Sarah to respond, hoping she would stand up to him. "It's a puppy," she said slowly, her voice calm yet edged with a hint of defiance. "Maya found it outside. We're going to keep it." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of softness cross Daniel's face, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "We can't just add more chaos to our lives right now," he retorted, the sharpness in his tone slicing through the fragile atmosphere. "We have enough to deal with." The words felt like daggers aimed at my heart, reminding me of how lost we all were, how each of us was battling our own demons in a house that had turned into a battlefield. But in that moment, Lily looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "But Daddy, he needs us," she said, her innocence shining through the darkness like a beacon. I could see the conflict in Daniel's expression, a flicker of uncertainty that made my heart race. Was it possible that Lily's pure-hearted plea could bridge the chasm between him and the rest of us? I stepped forward, feeling a surge of courage. "Please, Dad, this puppy is just like us," I implored. "He's been abandoned and alone, and we can give him a home. He could help us heal." My voice wavered slightly, but I pushed through the fear, hoping to break down the walls that had kept us apart for so long. Daniel's gaze softened for a moment, and the tension in the room seemed to ease just slightly. I could see him wrestling with the notion of letting something new in, something that could potentially bring joy to our fractured family. The puppy barked, a small, hopeful sound that seemed to fill the silence, a gentle reminder of the warmth that could still exist in our lives. Finally, he exhaled a deep breath, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world had lifted just a little. "Fine," he said reluctantly, glancing between me and the puppy. "But you'll all have to take care of it. I can't handle any more responsibility right now." His words were laced with hesitation, but I felt a glimmer of hope rising within me. Perhaps this was the first step towards reuniting our fractured family, a chance to rebuild something beautiful amidst the chaos. With that small victory, I knew we had begun a journey together, one that would require patience, love, and an open heart. I watched as my family slowly began to gather around the puppy, drawn together by this new life we had welcomed. In that moment, I felt a warmth spreading through me, a sense of possibility that whispered, maybe everything would be all right after all. As the days went by, the puppy settled into our home, and his presence began to illuminate the darker corners of our lives. I named him Max, a name that felt strong and dependable, much like I hoped he would be for my family. Every morning, he would leap out of his makeshift bed and greet me with the kind of enthusiasm that felt infectious. No matter the chaos surrounding us, Max's joy became a beacon of light, drawing my family closer together. I could see subtle changes in my father, Daniel, as he interacted with Max. The stiffness in his posture seemed to soften, and his voice, usually filled with frustration or indifference, took on a gentler tone. One afternoon, I found them sprawled on the living room floor. Max nestled between them as Daniel tossed a ball for him to chase. The sight filled me with a strange mix of hope and apprehension. Maybe this little creature could bridge the gap between my father and the warmth we once shared as a family. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were still fragile. Sarah was often lost in her thoughts, her eyes clouded with worry, and I knew she was carrying burdens that she didn't share with me. I tried to step in as much as I could, helping with Lily, who was enchanted by Max's playful antics. She would giggle endlessly as he bounced around, chasing after shadows, and her laughter was like music in our home, a reminder that innocence still existed amidst our troubles. One evening, while I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I noticed my mom staring at the horizon, her expression distant. I felt the urge to approach her, to ask what was weighing on her heart, but I hesitated. I had always wanted to be the one to fix things, to stitch up the torn fabric of our family, but I was unsure how to address her pain. Instead, I picked up Max and brought him over, hoping his presence could coax her out of her reverie. "Mom, look," I said, trying to lighten the mood as Max clumsily tumbled over his own paws, creating an endearing spectacle. Sarah turned her gaze toward us, her lips curling into a faint smile, but her eyes still held shadows. "He's really something, isn't he?" she replied, her voice soft and reminiscent of the warmth we used to share. "He is. I think he's helping us," I said, more hopeful than sure. "Maybe we can all take him to the park this weekend?" Her expression shifted slightly, a flicker of excitement replaced by a wave of uncertainty. "I don't know, sweetheart. I'm not sure I can manage that right now." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. I wanted so desperately for things to feel normal again, to relive those carefree weekends spent laughing and playing together. "We can do it together, Mom. Just us and Max. It might be nice," I insisted, my heart racing at the thought of pulling her back into the light. Finally, a glimmer of resolve crossed her face, and she nodded. "All right, let's see how it goes." Encouraged by her response, I quickly dashed inside to grab a toy for Max, determined to make this weekend special. I thought if we could get outside, feel the sun on our faces, it might just remind us of happier times. As the weekend approached, I noticed that Daniel was spending more time with Max. He would come home from work and head straight to the backyard, tossing the ball or simply watching him chase butterflies. For the first time in ages, I saw him smile, and I felt a flicker of hope that maybe we could all begin to heal together. But along with the joy came a weight that had yet to be lifted. The tension between my parents still loomed in the background like an uninvited guest. While Daniel engaged with Max, I caught fleeting moments where he and Sarah would exchange sharp words, their frustrations bubbling to the surface. I felt like a tightrope walker, trying to balance on a thin line between my parents, desperate to keep everything from tipping over. The day of our outing arrived, and I could hardly contain my excitement. I gathered snacks, a blanket, and Max's favorite toys, bustling about the house in a whirlwind of energy. Lily danced around the living room, twirling with glee, her laughter filling the air with a lightness I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. When we finally piled into the car, I looked over at my parents. Daniel seemed less tense, his focus turned toward the horizon, while Sarah wore a hesitant smile, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. As we arrived at the park, I could feel the warmth of the sun seeping into my skin, igniting a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this day would mark a turning point for us. Max bounded out of the car, his tail wagging in wild circles, and as we followed him onto the lush grass, I watched my family start to engage with one another. Daniel threw the ball, and Sarah cheered him on, a genuine spark igniting their interactions. Lily giggled as Max leaped to catch the ball mid-air, and for the first time in ages, I felt a sense of unity. It was in that moment, amidst the laughter and joy, I realized that while the road ahead might still be rocky, we were finally taking the steps to mend what was broken. I held on to that thought as tightly as I could, hoping it would guide us through whatever storms still lay ahead. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt a surge of gratitude for Max, the unexpected lifeline in our lives. I knew that together we could weather any storm that came our way, learning to lean on each other, just as we had learned to lean on him. It was a small victory in a long journey, but one that filled me with hope for the future. If you enjoyed this story and want to continue following Maya's journey, please subscribe for more heartfelt tales and adventures. As I held the tiny puppy against my chest, its warmth seeped into my heart, filling the void that had grown wider in our home. With each passing moment, the storm outside raged on, but inside I felt a flicker of hope igniting. I glanced at Lily, who was mesmerized by the little creature's feeble attempts to escape the confines of my embrace. Her innocent laughter cut through the tension that had become a staple in our lives, and I couldn't help but smile. It was as if this puppy had cast a spell, binding us together in a moment of pure joy that we desperately needed. When we settled on the living room couch, I wrapped a blanket around us, shielding the puppy from the chill in the air. I could sense my mother's eyes on us, a mixture of curiosity and concern etched across her face. Sarah had been carrying the weight of our family on her shoulders, trying to mend the fractures between my father and us. I hoped that in this fleeting moment, she could see a glimmer of the happiness we once shared before everything started to unravel. "Can we name it?" Lily's voice broke through my thoughts, bubbling with excitement. She had always been the one to dream up whimsical names for our pets, and I knew this time would be no different. "What about Spark, because it's so cute and fluffy?" Her eyes twinkled with that innocent wonder that reminded me of what we were fighting for. "Spark sounds perfect," I agreed, tucking the puppy closer to me. As I said the name, I felt a sense of ownership, a sense of responsibility to protect this little being just as I wanted to protect my family. In that moment, I realized that Spark was not just a puppy. He symbolized everything we needed, a spark of joy, hope, and resilience amidst our struggles. Days turned into weeks, and Spark quickly became the heart of our home. My father, Daniel, who had often retreated into his shell, began to engage with the puppy in surprising ways. I caught him sharing soft smiles as Spark nuzzled against his feet or barked playfully at the shadows on the wall. The walls of indifference that had surrounded him began to crumble, and I felt an odd mix of relief and trepidation. Was it possible for him to truly change, or was this just a fleeting moment of connection? One evening, I found my father sitting on the porch, Spark curled up on his lap, his fingers absently scratching behind the puppy's ears. "It's been a while since I felt this relaxed," he admitted, his voice low and slightly hesitant. I lingered at the door, unsure if I should join him. This was a rare opportunity, and I didn't want to disrupt the fragile peace we had found. "Mind if I sit?" I finally ventured, taking a seat beside him. The warmth of the setting sun bathed us in a golden glow, and for the first time in ages, we shared a moment of silence that felt rich and full rather than heavy and strained. "I've been thinking," he began, still focused on Spark, "about how I've been handling things. I've been distant, and I see that now. I want to do better." My heart swelled at his admission, but with it came the fear of being let down again. I wanted to believe he could change, but the past loomed like a shadow over our conversation. "I appreciate that, Dad. It means a lot to hear you say it." My voice wavered slightly, but I pushed through the knot in my throat. "We just want to feel like a family again." His gaze finally shifted to me, and for the first time in a long while, I saw something like understanding in his eyes. "I know I've hurt you and your mother," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I want to fix it, but it's hard to know where to start." "Just being here is a start," I replied, feeling the tears well up. I quickly blinked them away, unwilling to let this moment become tainted by sadness. "We just need you to show up, to be present. We can work through the rest together." Daniel nodded slowly, and as Spark shifted in his lap, I felt a surge of optimism. The puppy had brought us here, sparking a conversation I feared would never happen. Maybe, just maybe, we could navigate through our pain and find a way back to one another. As the weeks continued to unfold, I noticed more changes. Sarah's laughter returned, a sound I thought I would never hear again. She started to plan family dinners, and even Daniel joined in the preparations, bringing home groceries and helping to cook. I marveled at the way our home began to feel alive again, as if the very walls were breathing in the renewed energy we were creating together. But beneath the surface, I sensed an undercurrent of unease. The past wasn't something we could just ignore, and every so often I would catch a look between my parents that sent my heart racing. The tension, while lessened, still lingered like a faint ache. I often found myself wondering if the cracks would ever fully heal, or if we were merely masking the deeper issues that had plagued us for so long. One particularly rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled in the distance, I gathered Lily and Spark in my arms, hoping to escape into our little world of imagination. We sprawled on the floor, creating a castle of pillows and blankets, and as I watched my sister's face light up with joy, I was reminded of what was at stake. Our family had the potential to be whole again, but it would take more than just a few moments of laughter. It would require vulnerability and an unwavering commitment to face the storms together. I squeezed Lily tightly, feeling Spark wriggle in my lap. I needed to be brave, not just for myself, but for my entire family. We were all in this together, and I was determined to protect the flicker of hope that Spark had ignited within us. In that moment, I made a silent vow to keep fighting for my family, to keep loving and healing, and to never lose sight of the light that had begun to shine through the cracks. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, casting a warm glow on Spark as he snuggled against me. His gentle breathing calmed my racing heart, and for a moment, I felt like everything would be okay. I glanced at the clock and realized I had to get up. The day awaited, and with it, the challenges that lay ahead. As I slipped out of bed, I could hear the faint sounds of Sarah in the kitchen. She was already up, trying to make sense of the chaos in our lives. I could tell she was doing her best to hold everything together, but the weight was heavy on her shoulders. After brushing my teeth and pulling on a sweater, I padded downstairs, careful not to wake Lily. She was still in her room, blissfully unaware of the grown-up problems that loomed over us like a storm cloud. As I entered the kitchen, I found Sarah stirring a pot of oatmeal, the steam curling into the air, mixing with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. I could see the exhaustion etched on her face, the kind that comes from sleepless nights and unrelenting worry. "Morning, Maya," she greeted, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I could sense the tension in the air, the unsaid words hanging between us. "I hope you're hungry." "I am, Mom," I replied, trying to match her enthusiasm. I reached down to scratch Spark behind his ears, and he wagged his tail in response, adding a lightness to the room that hadn't been there in a long time. "Spark is hungry too," I joked, and Sarah chuckled, the sound a little more genuine this time. As I settled at the table, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father was the missing piece of our breakfast puzzle. Daniel had been distant for so long, his emotional presence flickering like a dying candle. I remembered the way he had looked at Spark the night before, a faint glimmer of warmth breaking through his stoic demeanor. Maybe he could still be reached. "Do you think Dad will be home for breakfast?" I asked, my voice tinged with hope. Sarah paused, her eyes darkening momentarily before she resumed stirring the oatmeal. "He has a lot on his plate, sweetie," she said, her tone delicate, as if she were handling something fragile. "But we can always save him a bowl." I nodded, unsure if that was enough. My mind raced with thoughts of how I could help mend our fractured family. I wanted to believe that Spark could bridge the gap between us, but I also knew that healing took time and effort, something Daniel seemed unwilling to give. After breakfast, I decided to take Spark for a walk. The cool morning air felt refreshing against my skin, and as we stepped outside, I felt a surge of determination wash over me. With every step, I hoped to gather the courage I needed to talk to my father. I led Spark down the familiar path, his tiny paws patting eagerly against the ground, oblivious to the weight of the world on my shoulders. While walking, I let my mind wander, contemplating the small victories that had come from rescuing Spark. I thought of the way Lily's eyes lit up when she first met him, how her laughter had filled our home with a brightness it desperately needed. I wondered if Daniel could experience that same joy if he let himself in. As we rounded the corner of our street, I spotted Daniel's car parked outside the house, and my heart raced. He was home. I hesitated for a moment, glancing down at Spark, who seemed eager to meet his owner. I took a deep breath and steeled myself for whatever conversation lay ahead. When I walked back inside, I found Daniel sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV that wasn't even on. The room felt heavy with silence, and my heart sank. It was like he was in his own world, one where none of us could reach him. I approached cautiously, holding Spark close to my chest. "Dad?" I said softly, unsure of how to break through the walls he had built around himself. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I wasn't sure if he even recognized me. But then I saw it, a flicker of recognition, followed by something softer. "Hey, Maya," he replied, his voice a mere whisper. I stepped closer, holding Spark out towards him. "This is Spark. I rescued him last night," I explained, trying to inject some warmth into the conversation. "I thought you might want to meet him." Daniel's gaze shifted to the puppy, and his lips curved upward ever so slightly. It was a small movement, but it felt monumental to me. "He's a cute little guy," he said, his tone lightening just a fraction. My heart swelled with hope as I gently placed Spark on the couch beside him. "Do you want to hold him?" I asked, my voice almost trembling with anticipation. I could see the hesitation in Daniel's eyes, but the curiosity was undeniable. He reached out slowly, and as he scooped Spark into his arms, something in the room shifted. The distance that had characterized our relationship began to feel a little less overwhelming. "Mom and Lily are in the kitchen," I encouraged, watching him as he cradled Spark gently. "You should join us. We're having oatmeal." Daniel looked up at me, his expression momentarily breaking from the heavy fog that had settled around him. "Yeah, maybe," he said, though it sounded like he was still wrestling with himself. I took a seat next to him, my heart pounding as I waited for him to make a move. As we sat together in that small moment of connection, I realized that perhaps it didn't have to be a grand gesture to start healing. Maybe it was just about these little steps, moments of vulnerability and shared joy. And as I watched my father stroke Spark's soft fur, I felt a flicker of hope ignite once more, a promise that maybe we could all find our way back to one another. As the days passed, I noticed subtle shifts in our household dynamic. My father's laughter, once a rare sound, began to echo through the halls, often accompanied by the clumsy antics of Spark, who was growing stronger and more playful with each passing day. I watched them together, relishing in how the puppy seemed to thaw my father out of his shell. The ice around his heart was melting, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The little moments shared between them, a game of fetch or a lazy afternoon sprawled on the floor, reminded me of the father I once knew before he became lost in his own pain. Sarah, too, appeared more animated. She took to cooking meals with a renewed zest, filling our home with fragrant aromas that lingered long after dinner was over. With each meal, she would smile softly at the way my father and I would encourage Spark to perform tricks. It felt like our family was slowly knitting itself back together, each thread a shared laugh or a whispered secret. Even Lily, always keenly observant, would giggle at the sight of our little family gatherings, her innocent joy infectious. It was as if the puppy had opened a door that had long been locked, allowing light to seep in where darkness had once prevailed. One evening, as I sat on the porch with Spark nestled in my lap, I turned my gaze to the horizon, watching the sun dip below the trees, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. My heart felt heavy yet hopeful. I could sense my mother's struggle lingering just beneath the surface, her attempts to hold us together often met with silence from my father. The warmth that Spark had brought us was undeniable, but I feared it was a thin veil covering the deeper issues that still loomed over our family. A part of me yearned to address them, to confront the unspoken truths that lingered like shadows in our conversations. "Do you think we can ever really go back to how things were?" I asked Spark, chuckling at the absurdity of talking to a puppy. He looked up at me, tilting his head, and in that moment, I felt like he understood the weight of my question, even if he couldn't answer. I sighed, resting my chin on his soft head, needing the comfort he provided. That night, after Sarah had tucked Lily into bed, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her gaze lost in a half-finished cup of tea. I could see the flicker of worry in her eyes, a reflection of the thoughts that were keeping her awake. I joined her, not saying anything at first, but letting the silence hang between us like a fragile thread. Finally, I took a breath, mustering the courage to speak. "Mom, do you think we should talk about Dad? I mean, really talk?" Her eyes flickered up to meet mine, surprise mingling with concern. "Maya, I don't know if that's the right approach," she replied hesitantly. "He's been through so much, and I don't want to push him away." "But we can't just ignore it forever," I insisted softly. "Spark is bringing him back, but we need to help him heal too. I can feel that he's still hurting, Mom. We all are." Sarah sighed deeply, running her fingers through her hair. "It's complicated, honey. Your father carries burdens I'm not sure he's ready to share. But maybe you're right. Perhaps we could try to talk, to find a way to communicate without fear of judgment or anger." With a small smile, I felt a surge of hope. "Let's plan a family day, just us and Spark. We can go to the park, be together without the pressures of everything else." She nodded slowly, a glimmer of agreement in her eyes. that sounds nice, Maya. I think we could all use a day like that. But we need to approach it carefully. I just want to protect you and your sister. The next morning, I woke up early, the sun just starting to peek through the curtains. I could hear Spark's little paws dancing across the kitchen floor as my father prepared breakfast. I smiled to myself, grateful for the small victories we were experiencing. As I walked into the kitchen, I found my father humming softly, his presence lighter than it had been in years. It made me wish, even more, for a peaceful family outing where we could all be united. "Good morning, Spark," I exclaimed, bending down to ruffle his fur, causing him to bounce excitedly. My father glanced up, a hint of surprise on his face. "Morning, Maya," he replied, his voice warm yet cautious. I wanted to push past the unease, but I knew it was essential to take it one step at a time. As the day unfolded, I shared my idea with my father, describing the park, the picnic, and how Spark could run free. He seemed hesitant at first, but I could see that my enthusiasm was beginning to chip away at his reservations. "You know, that actually sounds nice," he said eventually, a small smile breaking through. With every small agreement, I felt a sense of hope blossoming in my chest. Maybe this day could be the start of something beautiful, a day where we could lay our burdens down and simply be a family, united by love and the innocence of our puppy. Once we had settled on the plan, I gathered Lily and Sarah, bursting with excitement as I shared the details. Lily clapped her hands in glee, her innocence igniting a spark of joy in my heart. Together, we began packing a basket with sandwiches and snacks, Spark playfully darting around our legs, eager to join in on the fun. With each passing moment leading up to our family day, I felt the bonds between us strengthening, the air filled with the sense of hope as we prepared to confront our truths amidst laughter, love, and a rambunctious puppy. As we stepped out of our home, I whispered a silent prayer that this day would be the turning point we all so desperately needed. And in the back of my mind, I felt a growing urge to invite others to share their stories, stories of hope, resilience, and healing, so that together we could find strength in our struggles. I knew we weren't alone in this journey. With Spark leading the way, it was time for us to reclaim our family, one joyous moment at a time. As the warmth of the afternoon sun filtered through the kitchen window, I watched Lily as she played with Spark, the puppy's tail wagging furiously with each little squeal of laughter she let out. It was hard to believe that just days ago, he had been a mere bundle of fur shivering in the rain. Now he was a vibrant part of our home, transforming our living room into a wonderland of joy. It was strange how a small creature could light up the shadows of our lives, but Spark did exactly that. I felt my heart swell with gratitude, not just for him, but for the newfound bond that was slowly knitting my family back together. I glanced toward the hallway where my father usually retreated after dinner, lost in his own world of isolation and unspoken turmoil. Daniel had been distant for so long that I hardly knew the man I was supposed to call my dad. Yet, as I watched him crouch down beside Lily and Spark, tentatively reaching out a hand to pet the puppy, something shifted within me. There was a flicker of something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years, perhaps a hint of joy or the ghost of a smile. I held my breath, half expecting the moment to shatter like glass, but it didn't. Instead, he laughed, a low rumble that filled the air with warmth and light. "Look at him, Maya, he's gotten so big already," he said, his voice softening as he spoke. The moment felt surreal, a fragile bubble that I desperately wanted to preserve. I stepped closer, feeling the warmth of my father's voice wash over me like a balm. As if sensing the shift, Spark nestled into Daniel's hand, eyes glimmering with trust. I caught Sarah watching from the doorway, her expression a mix of hope and disbelief. I could see her heart lifting, as if she too were weighing the possibility of healing. I felt an odd urgency to seize this moment, to build on the fragile connections we were beginning to form. "Maybe we could take Spark for a walk later," I suggested, hoping to keep the momentum going. My mother nodded vigorously, her eyes lighting up at the thought of a family outing. "I'd love that. We can pack a little picnic too," she added, her voice bright with enthusiasm. It was the first time in a long while that we had even mentioned doing something together as a family. I could feel the knots in my stomach loosening a bit, replaced by a flutter of optimism. After a quick lunch, we gathered our things, some sandwiches, a couple of juice boxes, and of course, Spark's favorite toy. The air outside felt electric with possibility as we stepped out onto the path that wound through the nearby park. As we walked, I could see Daniel begin to engage with Lily more, answering her curious questions about the trees and the clouds above. There was something wonderfully freeing about being in nature, with the sun shining brightly above us, illuminating everything it touched. I hoped that this new routine, spending time together with Spark, would help bridge the gaps that had formed between us. "Do you think Spark likes the park?" Lily asked, her little hand clutching tightly to the leash. I smiled, watching as the puppy eagerly sniffed the flowers and chased after butterflies. "I think he loves it," I replied, glancing at my father, "just like us." The corners of his mouth lifted ever so slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of my words. I could tell he was trying, and that realization filled me with a sense of purpose. As we reached a clearing, I spread out the blanket I had brought and settled down beside my mom and Lily. Daniel stood a bit apart, still wrestling with his own feelings, but he watched us with an intensity that gave me hope. I broke our sandwiches into smaller pieces, sharing them with my family and Spark, who gobbled them up with delight. Laughter bubbled up between us, a sound I had missed dearly. It reminded me of simpler times, moments when we weren't burdened by the weight of our struggles. "Can we tell stories?" Lily piped up, her eyes shining bright with excitement. I exchanged glances with my mother and father. "Absolutely. What kind of stories do you want to hear?" Sarah prompted, leaning closer to her youngest. "The ones about brave heroes," Lily declared, her innocence wrapping around me like a hug. "Okay, how about we tell stories about our favorite heroes?" I suggested, hoping to weave in a little lightness. I shared about a courageous dog that saved a family from a fire. And Lily followed with a tale about a superhero who could fly. I could see Daniel's posture shift, and for the first time, he began to share too. He spoke softly about a time he had saved a friend from drowning during a summer camp when he was young. As he spoke, a look of nostalgia swept across his face, and I could feel the distance between us continue to shrink. The afternoon drifted on, and as the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over everything, a sense of peace enveloped us. Spark, tired from the day's adventures, curled up in my lap, his little body a comforting weight. I felt an overwhelming gratitude for this moment, one that felt like the first step toward healing our family. We were still a work in progress, but we were together, and that was enough. As we packed up our things and headed back home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had turned a corner. Maya, Sarah, Daniel, and Lily, we were no longer just individuals navigating our separate struggles. We were a family, learning to love again, and in that realization, I found a flicker of hope that promised brighter days ahead.